Well, welcome to Teacher Toolkit, Harnessing Generative AI for Engaging Math and Science Lessons. I know that we have a small group tonight, so I'm happy to talk about any of the questions that are most pertinent to your school board. I also want to give some helpful ideas specifically around math and science because there have been conversations over the past year of like, oh, AI is not good at math, and I want to address some of those things while we're in the room tonight. I would love for you all to acknowledge in the chat where you're from. I'm coming in from Chicago. The city of Chicago is located on land that is and has long been a center for Native peoples. The area is a traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, or the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other nations consider this area their traditional homeland, including the Maiamia, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac and Fox, Peoria, Kaskaskia, Wea, Kickapoo, and Mascouten. The city specifically acknowledges the contributions of Kitahawao, the Potawatomi, in fostering the community that has been Chicago. We acknowledge all Native peoples who came before us and who continue to contribute to our city. I work for Advanced Learning Partnerships, and we partnership with Dell, and Dell and OECM have brought this opportunity to you. So we're glad that you're here. And I would also just like to acknowledge that we are really intentional about keeping students and teachers safe with these new AI technologies. So just be mindful that the tools used in this webinar may or may not be approved for use by your local board. We will do some practice prompts specifically around math and science, and you are welcome to use any large language model that you prefer. If your school board is using Google Gemini, that's welcome. ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft Copilot, whatever you feel comfortable with. So I've been facilitating around generative AI for a while now, and this topic has a lot of feelings for folks. Some people are hype, all in, trying everything, and other people are really cautious and skeptical. And I found personally that as I'm talking about this new technology that is taking over the world, I want to amplify my humanness. And so I'm bringing my strengths from the StrengthsFinder test: futuristic, connectedness, ideation, positivity, and strategic. And I think it's really helpful, especially when I talk to larger audiences, to understand like my natural tendency is futuristic, which is why AI interests me. So other people have different strengths and might not be as engaged around the topic. So it's not that I have something that they don't, I just have a different strength. Same thing with ideation, like that pair of like, I want to think about the future and I want to think about how to do it and ideate on it. So I'm coming with those, with that lens, and I would love this rhetorical question just for everybody to consider. How can we amplify our own strengths and values in a world with generative AI? So for this session, we want to understand the risks and responsibilities of Gen AI in education. Since this is the first OECM webinar, I want to make sure to touch on some of those fundamentals. And then I want to explore teacher use cases in math and science. And because we have a small group, whatever other outcomes you want to work on, I'm happy to address those questions and concerns. So I'm curious, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, how have you tried using generative AI in anything? I know we don't have specific math and science teachers in the room, but how are you using generative AI in your workflow, in your school board, in your personal life? Is there anything you're willing to share? And you can unmute yourselves or share in the chat.
Mostly to I left Grammarly and now I just work with Gemini.
Okay.
Creating images,
Mm-hmm.
Creating text.
Mm-hmm.
Not much math in my job.
Yeah.
But maybe after this, I will ask to create some sheets for me, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it can do that. It does that really well, actually.
That's about it for me.
Okay, thanks for sharing.
For us, we are a Google School Board too. So we have activated Gemini, and sometimes we do use it to help us with emails. And we do also use Canva. So we create images from there and presentation. That's it for now.
Yeah, that's great. I love just hearing how people are starting.
I use it a lot for, well, trying to explore a bit of coding with especially, but more so for Google Sheets. I write a lot of like emails and documentation. I have other responsibilities at work, so I help new teachers. So I do create a lot of like resources in terms of like ideas for summative evaluations. Um, anything from uh, building ideas for inclusive tasks or presenting concepts or the text nivelé, so like leveled reading on similar topics so that everybody feels included. Dabble a little bit with presentations, but I mainly use ChatGPT. And Claude. Though now I'll use Gemini with work. Yeah, so I don't pay for like Gamma or any presentation software. So I'm just, dabbling a little bit with like free versions for slides and stuff like that. But I really like to brainstorm and have conversations. And I will admit, since we are a small group, that I do have conversations at supper time when I'm by myself.
This is not recorded, so you're fine.
I know, and I did activate my camera, forgot that it was, but so I am a bit, I enjoy the whole entire aspect of everything in terms of AI. So
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. You said a few things. We are going to talk about differentiated instruction as it relates to math. So I'm glad that you've used that for leveling reading. And then also, I do find that like for any generative AI, it is worth a discussion. Like going to it for a quick answer, typing in one question and grabbing an answer to go is not the best, deepest, most best use of the software for any of them. So I like that you're having conversations and making that a dialogue. There are a lot of frameworks for AI literacy out there. I've posted this one developed by some professors at Barnard College. This is from the EDUCAUSE website. And I think any framework, the UNESCO framework for teachers and students is another good one, but I think it's a good foundational starting point. Like, what is your goal for the teachers in your school board and your students in the school board and staff in the school board? When we say like, oh, we just have to learn about AI, it's kind of nebulous and vague and daunting. So starting with the fundamentals, like what is a large language model? What is a GPT? What is a hallucination? And then working up to use and apply, how do you write a prompt? What goes into a good prompt? Moving up the triangle to analyze and evaluate. Is my output valid? Is it true? Is this the best output I could get? Or do I have to refine my prompts? And then moving up to create is where we're doing something novel with AI that wouldn't have been possible before. So I think there's going to be really cool applications in education. I'm not totally seeing them yet, but I'm hoping that AI can solve some of the deep problems that we have within education. I know, at least in the United States, that there's a sub shortage. I'm wondering how AI could solve that. And we would use it at the create level to create a solution to a problem that you don't call them subs though. I just remembered temporary
Supply teacher?
supply teacher. Yep. Yeah, we have a supply teacher shortage. So like maybe AI could help with that.
Yeah, we have the same problem. We're not at the point where we think of replacing them with AI yet.
No, yeah, and that's not even what I mean, but like using the AI to solve the problem. Like maybe
Okay.
AI could come up with innovative ways to find more people, new people, things like that. So yeah, I think we're just like scratching the surface of what's possible at the create level.
Sure.
Any questions?
No, sorry.
Okay. So sometimes when I work with school districts, we could spend a whole day on understanding AI, but I want to go through a couple definitions as you're thinking about working with your students. Maybe you're familiar with all these or working with teachers. These might be the basics that you want to start with. So starting with what is generative AI? Generative AI algorithms can be used to create new content. Like you've already said, you're using it to create video, sheets, text, audio, simulations, code, the list goes on. How does generative AI work? It creates a reasonable continuation. So it's not trying to give you the exact answer or the best answer. It's trying to give you a reasonable answer. This graph shows you the completion of this sentence. The best thing about AI is its ability to, and it comes up with reasonable answers. It could be any of them, and it's random what reasonable answer it picks as the next word in the sentence. So that gets us to large language models, which are from very large data sets, and each large language model, ChatGPT, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, has different data sets, but many are pulling from the same data. And they're given text that they split into characters. And these characters or subwords are known as tokens. And I really like people to understand the word token because when we're talking to AI, it feels very human-like. That's the goal of it. And it's creating this conversation that feels really natural. It's creating a response that really sounds good to us. And so to keep in mind that it's a token, it's a set of information that the machine thinks is the best next thing to put. So keeping in mind that it is a machine and machine learning that we're engaging with. So all of these LLMs have GPTs, generative pre-trained transformers. The generative stands for it's making something that never existed before. It's generating. Pre-trained, that's that large data set. And then transformer, it's that action of taking those tokens and putting a string of them together to sound good. And then I would love to spend so much time talking about the risks and responsibilities when we think about student privacy, how generative AI makes mistakes and students have to fact check, plagiarism. There's a whole slew of them, but I found this slide from John Ippolito, and he links it, the references down here, but he gives permission to recreate this slide. So if it's helpful, these are some of the things that we're talking about when we talk about risks associated with AI. So kind of a very fast overview of some vocab, but we get into these conversations, I'm hearing like teachers don't need to know that, they just need to know what to do with it. And I am somebody who holds people to high expectations. And so why wouldn't we help educate folks right now with some basic knowledge, because we're going to be interacting with these tools for the rest of our lives. So instead of taking the shortcut, I feel like it's worth a few extra minutes to get that foundation. So something really interesting about math and science is that we've already had tools forever that do precise calculations. And so there's been this conversation of like, oh, ChatGPT or the LLMs are not good at math. And that's true because they weren't meant to be. They were meant to sound human. And so if we're coming from a technology background or a math background or a computer science background, we're used to inputs and outputs that we can expect the exact right answer. And so it's hard to shift that mindset into the generative AI world where you might be having a conversation and the LLM's goal is not to get you the precise answer. Although they are getting better. And so as the programmers are working behind the scenes, these LLMs are producing more accurate results when we type in math and science questions or just doing data analysis. But I would love to talk a little bit about what can we do and what should we do in a math or science setting? Because I'm all for using the right tool. Exactly. If we have a calculator available, let's use the calculator to solve the problem. We don't need the generative AI to do everything for us if we've got other tools. Here's a few examples in the real world of how generative AI is being used right now. So it is being used for data analysis. Claude has introduced a new analysis tool, and Claude, I think, is probably leading the way in terms of like the accuracy and precision. And they've got, this is a linked article if you want to learn more, but you can type it, put in whole data sets and get some really cool graphs and interactive mathematics features. Scientists are using AI to help decode the language of whales. So they've been capturing data about the sounds that whales make, and humans have been trying to interpret the whale language for years. And now that we have generative AI to be able to synthesize these sounds, and generative AI has other language translation capabilities, they're using it to understand whales and other animal sounds. And then another one that's really fascinating to me is weather prediction, which is something that I would have thought we would want some of those precise equations and forecasting tools, but it's actually become really good at predicting extreme weather because it takes all of the history of weather and generates a prediction based on the inputs. And it's actually doing better than just using the forecasting equations that have been standard. So those are some interesting applications of math and science that maybe our students will be doing someday when they get their careers. Any questions or comments right now? As I'm kind of flying through some of that content.
No, that's perfect. Melanie created a first session for our teachers, I think was last month, and she basically covered the same subjects that you just did. So we're happy. We're on the right track.
Great. Excellent. So when we talk about using generative AI for class, tonight's session is focused specifically on how teachers would use generative AI for math and science. And then my second and third sessions will get into like student use. Always, whether we're talking about students or teachers, we want to start with prompt engineering, and really having a good foundational prompt is the best way to get what you want out of the tool. So I've been observing teachers and students using different LLMs in the classroom. And I found that students are using the LLM like they text, like really short sentences, shorthand, not full sentences. Same thing with teachers. They're treating it like just a question and answer. Like, I need to know this quick thing, ask ChatGPT or something. So I would love to see an education and emphasis on learning some prompt engineering. I imagine that this is a field that's going to change a lot very rapidly. But for now, for us to get the most out of these tools, it's helpful to understand how some prompts that help. So there's a ton of frameworks out there. There's 6-step frameworks and whole pages of prompt engineering guide. Here's a 3-step framework. Give the large language model a role. I like to use specificity. So you are a grade 9 algebra teacher in Ontario, Canada. So it is getting the like most precise information. Task, what do you want it to do? Give it very clear directions. And then what do you want the format of the output to be? If you're asking for a lesson plan, what are the components of that lesson plan? What do you want it to look like? Do you want it to be in a table? These are all things that we can specify and ask. So I'm going to show you two examples that I did today. Open-ended questions. I found that LLMs struggle with open-ended math questions, and I love this. I know some other people are like, it's bad, it doesn't work. I'm like, how can we use this to our advantage? So one way is to ask open-ended questions because they're AI resistant. The AI might not necessarily be able to solve them, or it might get confused. And then the second way is to ask students to evaluate an output. So if you ask the AI for 3 of something, give me 3 equations that pass through the coordinate 2, 7. Sometimes it kind of struggles with like, it can do 1, but if you ask it for 3, and it could be a lot of different equations go through one coordinate. You could get some answers that students have to evaluate and decide whether they're true or false and do some fact checking. So this example, I asked ChatGPT today, give me 10 unique numbers that are less than 10 and greater than or equal to 5. And it said there aren't 10 numbers between 5 and 10. But in my mind, I was like, yeah, there are. Like there's 6.1, 7.2, all these numbers. So it did say, however, if you're looking for a way to generate a list, you could use decimals and fractions. So it's kind of like, well, it knew, but also it could have just given them to me. And then this was Gemini's response to the same question. Give me 10 numbers that are less than 10 and greater than or equal to 5. So it gives me 5. I said, I asked for 10, said 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
So that's just to show how these LLMs are working right now. I appreciate the laughing reaction. I think there's a lot teachers could do with this. Instead of seeing this as a barrier, like, oh, it doesn't work, let's embrace it. Let's have students analyze that output. And as teachers and school boards are deciding what their comfort level is with students using these tools, I even think just a teacher showing this in front of the class, not every student has to do it, but the teacher could use it as an example while they're teaching AI without students interacting with the tool. And they're modeling for students how it works and how it doesn't work. So the top one was ChatGPT, and then the bottom one was Gemini.
I meant which GPT model?
Oh,
Because I just asked mine and I got a list.
And you got a list? Oh, good for
Yeah.
you. I was using the enterprise version, which I don't know which one that is.
4.0 mini preview.
Might have been 4.0 mini. I don't remember. But you got a list. So that's a great conversation too. That like, when does it work and when doesn't it?
And the idea of access to tools, because that's the paid for tool, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
an important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so those are open-ended questions. In math and science for teacher use, I really like it for analogies. Generative AI can create some scenarios that help you compare a difficult concept to something that students can wrap their heads around. So here is an example prompt. Act as it, insert the grade, insert the subject, teacher in Ontario, Canada, or Ottawa. Create 5 analogies to help students understand and be more engaged to learn about insert topic by relating the concept to something they like and are more familiar with. So I asked, and just so you know, like I'm putting my chat threads, I didn't for the last one, but most of these chat threads are linked in the speaker notes at the bottom. So this one was act as a high school biology teacher. and create analogies related to cellular respiration. So it gave you cellular respiration as charging your phone, as concert energy transfer, as a chocolate factory, as video game power-ups, and money in a vending machine. So as a former high school math teacher, coming up with all of the analogies, all of the scenarios, like students say, like, when am I going to use this? On the spot, it's really tricky, but to ask a chatbot to give you a selection, and a teacher could use one of them, they could use all of them, but it helps make that lesson more engaging. And then a few more examples for using generative AI and math and science: generating practice questions. You can create worksheets, checks for understanding. So a few prompts here: act as a teacher, create 20-question worksheet. Now, I would never advocate, I don't think it's best practice to give students a 20-question worksheet and just say, do math problems. But I like asking for a large number so that the teacher has a selection. If they want to give 10 questions, they can pick their favorite 10. Another example that I've seen teachers use with success is giving a YouTube video that they're going to show their students and ask it to create a study guide. And you can just put the YouTube link into the prompt, and it'll watch the video, analyze the video, and create those study questions. Are these ideas new to you? Have you seen something similar? Do you know how teachers are thinking about AI right now?
Well, in our school board, students do not have access to tools yet. So, but I mean, this summer, how would I call it? Like Le Cavalfo, Pascal, I don't know, like the online kind of consortium created a lot of resources for teachers. It's not all published, of course, but and it was a lot of examples like that, so that's good. You know, working with like prompt engineering and you know, how to like assign a role and ask for format and things like that. So I think teachers that I've interacted with so far are just starting to legally use it in our school board. Before we could not, so we're just starting, but this is a lot of what they do. I haven't had a lot of math teachers talk about different prompts yet, so I can't expand on that.
Sure.
We have some tools that do this as well, like you know, Kahoots and Canva and stuff like that. That there's AIs that you can use to you know, upload a document and create questions and stuff. So
Yep.
that's probably how they've dabbled with it so far, I would say. And
Yeah. For our school board too, we only open for the teachers, for the personnel, not for students for the time being. So we just started because our teachers, like, they are trying to differentiate when to create question to meet the differentiation, because before it's so much difficult to differentiate because they need to do everything by themselves. So now we show them it's very easy now. So you have different kind of students, so it's easy now to differentiate for them by just asking some different question, and that's it. You get the result and choose from that.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I'm going to come back to this, but since you just mentioned differentiated instruction, I want to touch on that, and then I'll go back to that previous slide. One thing I'm seeing with teachers is different amounts of success with asking GPTs to differentiate for them. So one way that we've started to think about it is being really intentional, that clear directions piece of the prompt. Like, what kind of differentiation do you want? So you could be differentiating the content, and that might be skill level, like we were talking about earlier. You could be differentiating the process. Students might be learning in a different way. The product, what they're creating might be different, or even learning environment. as Patrick just said, this is really difficult because of time. There's a whole host of reasons why it's hard. Teachers are working alone, they're overworked, they're stressed. So to create different things for a whole classroom full of students is very challenging. I also like teachers, before they write their prompt, to reflect on things that have been successful with differentiation in their classroom, because they can feed that into the prompt too. If you know that in your class or in your teaching style that there's something in particular that is helpful for differentiation, we should add that to the machine. We should give directions to put that human strength into the prompt. So I've been using this checklist with teachers. It's not a very specific prompt, but it's a list of ideas that can go into a prompt. So if you're going to be differentiating for math or science or any subject, are you trying to differentiate by content, process, product, or learning environment? Why? What need are you trying to meet for the students? So be very clear about what needs. You have a group of students who have different readiness levels, or you have a group of students who are absent and they need some of those like backfilling of information, or students with different interests, and you just want to differentiate to keep them engaged. What challenges do you want the LLM to address for you? So going to that question of why is differentiation really hard for teachers? It might be addressing time. It might be that you yourself can't come up with all the different levels of worksheets or levels of problems. And so you want the LLM to come up with an extension problem and a problem that has scaffolds. And so you're naming those specific things that you want it to do.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Actually, you made me think about that, because we've invested a lot in the thinking classroom.
Yes.
And by using extensions like that, and to keep students in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could use prompts to create those extensions, because that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you use the thinking classroom every day, it's it's a bit heavy on the math teacher to create all those extensions. So
Yeah.
did you perchance try to create those extensions
I
from a
haven't,
problem?
not specifically for thinking classrooms.
Okay.
I've done it for like a particular standard or target. Like I want students to do solve a system of equations by substitution, and give it like my curriculum regular problem, and then ask it to write an extension. So like
Okay.
that, but the ones that are in the Thinking Classrooms book have some different nuances that make them really good. And I would say, I've never thought about it, but if you take all those, I think it's like 14 chapters that Peter Liljedahl wrote,
Yeah.
like picking some of those concepts too to put in a prompt, I think would really help teachers a lot too, because even building thinking classrooms is, like you said, a lot on a daily basis for teachers to be thinking about. But if we could use AI to help do some of the synthesis of, well, you probably don't need it to help you defront the classroom. That was the one that came to mind first. But yeah, some of those components or those extension problems, that's a great idea.
Okay. Things to try.
Things to try. I linked in my speaker notes this conversation, and really all I wanted to focus on is like, I asked the GPT to differentiate some assessments in a 9th grade algebra class, to create 3 different product options. And I really did not like what it gave me. I like tried this prompt and I was like, no. So then I iterated on it. And I think right now, some folks know, like, yeah, you have to keep asking, you got to keep digging, and other people don't. So just modeling that, like, I didn't get what I wanted and I didn't give up. My beginning of my AI journey, I'd be like, oh, it's not good at that. I didn't think it was my fault. It wasn't like me, the prompter, who was wrong. It was the GPT was wrong. It's not good at differentiation. But being able to say, I liked this, focus on option 2, I don't like this, take that out and try again, and being really specific. Yeah, Melanie?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I noticed as well that because we've been talking a lot about UDL in our school board, and yes, GPT sometimes does not answer well. I don't know if you've explored Ludia in Poe. I can give you the link. It's a UDL chatbot.
Oh,
So I don't know if anyways you've seen it before, but
I haven't, but I would like to.
it will actually like support its answer with the UDL guideline that it applies
Oh,
to.
that's
So
great.
I think that's interesting. So I'll put the link in the chat before. I think for this, it's yeah, ChatGPT. Sometimes you gotta ask and ask.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I think we're gonna get into, thank you for that. We're gonna get into like some more of those custom chatbots and see some success with them. I know the Ontario, I don't know the specific name. It's the like Council of Teachers of Mathematics, whatever that's called in Ontario. Their leader created a chatbot of all the past articles for their magazine. And so math teachers can go in and ask it for a lesson, and it's got all this research and past teachers' experiences and lesson plans. So it's not just asking randomly, give me a math lesson, because that's hit or miss, but using that customized chatbot is really cool.
I think it's the OEME,
Yes, thank you.
Ontario Association for Mathematics in Education.
Yes, that's the one. Thank you.
I didn't know they had a chat bot though.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. The podcast is by a couple of the technology leaders at Waterloo Catholic School Board, and they interviewed the guy who created that chatbot. It was really,
It's
really
on the
interesting.
things to check list.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I can't remember the name of their podcast right now. But they've been talking a lot about AI, which is cool. I'm not going to go through each of these slides, but I just want you to know that I have some prompt examples. So if you're differentiating by student choice or student interests or varied student needs. So this slide deck is yours, whomever you're working with. If it's helpful to take one of these prompts and share it, go ahead. And I mean, we're talking about math and science, but they are applicable across all subjects. I mentioned I'd come back to this slide. As I've been learning about AI and AI in education, this book I've really appreciated. Teaching with AI. It's easy to read, easy to understand, I would say it's a practical guide. That's the subtitle. But there's a whole bunch of prompts throughout the book. They've got a chapter on cheating, a chapter on policies, a chapter on assessment. And they also begin the book with some fundamentals of AI and what AI looks like in our world, just understanding that context before diving into education. So on the left-hand side are some of the prompts from that book, pages 97 to 98. And they have some really creative ideas and their prompts are pretty simple, which is nice, easy to use. Suggest 10 ways to make this assignment more motivating. Why might students assume this assignment is just busy work? Some of those things that teachers don't necessarily think about till they give the assignment and then they're in the class and students are moaning and groaning or not engaged. We can try to like head some of that off up front with teacher lesson planning and teachers putting their assignments in chatbot and asking specific questions. Things like help me design an escape room. Things that would take too much time, that would take hours or a whole weekend for a teacher to do for a 45-minute lesson, to ask an AI to do it. And it can organize all the components and the pieces of something that would be pretty complicated, like an escape room. And we talked about this already, but propose 10 real world scenarios I could use in the classroom about whatever. So I didn't copy all of them. They had like a couple pages of prompts. I just wanted to give you a taste of what's in that book. And as you're leading AI in your school boards, I do highly recommend this book. I've read the whole thing. I think it's really, really useful and applicable. So I know that I've been talking fast, and I appreciate all of your engagement. I'm curious, well, one, we do have some time left over. So I'm happy to talk about anything that this conversation sparked that you're thinking about, but also interested to know what was interesting to you from this presentation.
Well, for myself, I've been vocal enough all the way through, so
Absolutely.
I take out some things that I need to try. I need to see I need to see if it's what kind of prompt would be able to create extensions for math problems. And I didn't think about asking him to create an escape like an escape room, but I'm curious about how it would respond.
Yeah.
And I definitely have to find that chatbot for those math teachers. I know a colleague would really love that,
Yeah.
the
Great.
math lead.
Mhm.
So that's what I take out of it.
Thank you.
Well, I
And
wasn't aware of that book, so I can't wait to get well, we both, I think, can't wait to get our hands on that. So
Nice.
that will be the payment for being here at
Yeah.
between 7 and 8
Yep.
from
Yeah. On a Thursday night.
from our boss.
Yep.
It's like, you have to buy us a book. By curiosity, excuse me, Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. Oh, are we allowed to share your presentation or?
Absolutely. Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you, because I think there's quite a lot of useful information that we can use and share.
Good.
So it will be useful for our school board too.
Great. I'm glad. I'm going to stop sharing and stop the recording.